Isn't it absolutely insane that we will deny the fact that we are suffering just to hold on to our suffering? Well, denial is the most predictable behavior of human beings, and I wasn't any different. Welcome back, brave explorers, traveling heroes, and powerful creators to another episode. I'm your host and guide, Zach Blakeney, and today we're going to dive into the Healing Porn Addiction series. This is episode 2, what I am calling the Trial by Fire. If you tuned into episode 1, you know I left you on a cliffhanger of what I was experiencing with my ex-wife. We were just now leaving the gym. And after pretty much telling you guys exactly all the things that I experienced up to that point over the 16 years of being really what I called sleepwalking through hell, living in hell on earth, we've now got to the point in the story where this is really the hardest part of my life. I'm leaving the gym, right? And me and my ex-wife are leaving the gym. She grabs my hand and she says, "Zach, we need to talk." And again, so much anxiety. I started almost to have an anxiety attack at that moment because I just knew deep down in my soul that she was going to want to talk about the porn addiction and the porn and what was going on. So we walk out to the car and we get into it was a truck. I get into my truck and she looks at me and she says, "Can I see your phone?" And again, every part of me is like, hell no, you can't see my phone. And I was very hesitant about it, but I did give her my phone. And she gets onto my phone and she goes into it and she actually opens up the in private browsing. Now, I thought I was safe by watching pornography on my phone and in private browsing. It could have changed by then. This was 2017 or so. And I had an Android, so I want to be really specific if anybody's listening. I've told this story before, and they're like, bro, in private browsing doesn't save your searches. That wasn't my experience. What my experience is that I went and she opened it up. She goes to in private browsing on the Droid, and she hits Google search, and the searches that I had searched had shown up. And maybe it was that I searched it so much that, even in private browsing, the Google algorithm saved it. But she pulls it up, and again, it's all the things that I've been watching that I wouldn't want her to know that I've been watching. If you would like to know what I watched, I was very transparent about what I watched in episode 1. I'm not going to rehash it here. And she says, "What's this?" And she shows me the phone. And I say, "I don't know. It's not me." She said, "Zach, this is your phone. Who else could it be? What is this?" I said, "I don't know. Somebody hacked my phone." And if you were in tune to episode 1, I like to use that lie and excuse a lot. I got hacked. She said, "There's no way." She said, "If you do not tell me the truth right now, I'm going to leave you." Now, while this is happening, there's another voice inside of me. And this voice inside of me is screaming. It's saying, "Tell her the truth. Tell her the truth." And I'm listening to this voice, but I'm still denying it as it's happening. So she asked me the third time and said that she's going to leave me if I don't tell the truth. And I still denied it. But I said, "It wasn't me, but I did do that. It wasn't me, but I did do that." Think about that duality. It wasn't me, but I did do that. So ultimately, I did admit to it. After denying it 3 times, with it in my face, with irrefutable evidence that I was watching pornography, I still denied it 3 times. Now, something happened during that time. After that, she got out of the car, my truck, whatever, and I started driving home. And it was the first time I ever wanted to actually kill myself. It was the first time that I had thoughts running through my head that I was either going to run my truck off the side of the road and hit a pole. There was a local sporting goods store. I thought about going and grabbing a gun and shooting myself and ending it that way. I thought about all different ways in which I wanted to kill myself. Now, I'm not saying I didn't have those sporadic thoughts as I was in the middle of the addiction, but I never actually believed that that was a possibility for me until that time. Now, as I'm driving home and I'm thinking about killing myself, another question pops in my head, and the question is, who's listening? And what I meant by that is that as I was denying my addiction, right, my porn use to her, I was hearing another voice inside of me saying, tell her the truth. So the question was who's listening? And that is a question that started to drive me on my life. And like, what does that mean? Like, how could I be listening to something inside of myself? But that was really where I hit rock bottom, right? It was that moment where I didn't have a will to live anymore. Well, it was chaos for a little bit, at home. And then I was looking at myself in the mirror, and it was a couple of days afterwards. I was looking at myself in the mirror, and I remembered all the times I had lied to her about catfishing men and women. Again, go back to episode 1 if you would like to listen to this, but I was catfishing men and women on Craigslist, sending them emails, dirty emails, and all these different things. And she had found it twice. And I denied it both times. And I'd remembered that I denied it. And it was kind of like, well, she knows about the porn now, and I really don't want to tell her about catfishing these people. And right when I said that, I was looking at myself in the mirror, and I got the craziest anxiety attack I had ever gotten. I became really red, and I started breathing really heavily, and I started sweating, and my heart was like palpitations and everything else. And I never experienced anything like that before. I had to sit down. I got so dizzy. But I knew that if my body was responding this way, that I had to tell her the truth. If I didn't tell the truth, I was going to keep experiencing these anxiety attacks. So about a week later after that, we were leaving the gym again, and I sat at the car, and it was the hardest thing I ever had to do. And I told her, I said, I need to tell you the truth about this as well. I did lie. I was catfishing those men and women on Craigslist, and I was just crying. And she was so angry. She was crying, but she was so angry. And ultimately, it was that lie that I believe, it was many lies. Don't get me wrong. Like I said, I lied. I manipulated. I was hiding my addiction. So like I would do anything for her to not see that part of me. But it was that lie in which betrayed our marriage, because it happened before we got married. It happened before she even agreed to marry me, and I lied about it. So she had felt like our whole marriage was started on a false premise, on a lie. And I can't disagree with that. You know what I mean? There's multiple lies. There's multiple things that I did where she didn't know about. So a little while later, she left for Thanksgiving. And, I was supposed to go to Thanksgiving with her and her family, but she went by herself. And a couple of months ago, prior to this, I had heard about transcendental meditation and how helpful it could be. So, the first step in healing for anybody that's listening right now from addiction is to admit or accept that you have an addiction, right? And people will spend, for me, 16 years denying it, right? Denying the addiction until I finally admitted that I had an addiction. And again, it was forced out. I'm not here saying proud of how it happened, right? How it happened is how it happened. It's not like I came out with my own volition. It was forced out of me. But that's the point. It's like once you accept it, right, healing actually begins. Well, I had heard about transcendental meditation, and then while my ex-wife was gone on Thanksgiving, I decided to buy the course. And I remember I was sitting and doing my first meditation, and I felt a lot of inner peace. And after doing the meditation, I went outside with my dog Reese, and I started throwing the ball with him. He liked to play fetch. And I remember just looking out, and all the colors were really vibrant. Like the trees was really vibrant, and I could feel the wind on my skin and the sun on my skin. And I felt this sense of peace and joy. And I let out this childlike laugh during a time in which I had nothing to be happy about. Like I was in the most anxiety and depressed, and I was worried that she was going to leave me. Like she hadn't decided whether she was going to leave me just yet. So I was so much anxiety whether she was going to leave me or not. I was alone on Thanksgiving. All of these things were happening, and I had no reason to laugh, but I let out this childlike laugh. And I remember being on the phone with her a day later because she didn't want to talk to me while she was gone. But we got on the phone and I was laughing on the phone and she was angry. She was like, well, I don't see what's funny. And I understand completely at this point, but I just knew that everything was going to be okay. And when I was in the middle of meditation, that's actually what came through was that, hey, you're going to be okay. So that was the first time that I experienced something different inside of me, like this other voice, right? Who's listening? Well, I also heard this other voice that told me to tell her the truth, also said, everything's going to be okay. Now, at the time, I thought that meant that everything was going to be okay with my marriage. As you know, and as you've already heard, she's my ex-wife, so that's not the case, but it is that everything was going to be okay with me, which is way more important. So my ex-wife at the time, she decided to say, but there were some stipulations. I needed to get help. So I started to seek out help and go to therapy. So I got a sex therapist that I went to and an anxiety therapist. Now, interesting enough, the sex therapist, on the very first time I saw her, we didn't really even talk about the porn addiction. She asked me to rate my honesty. How honest are you? And I was not at all. So again, if you're in the middle of porn addiction right now, like you're lying. Right? I mean, that's really the biggest part is that I'd like to call this, and I'll talk about these again at a later time, the 4 walls of dishonesty. And if you think about these 4 walls of dishonesty, these 4 walls are what keep your addiction alive. Number 1 is lying. You lie about the addiction. You lie about the addiction to other people. You also lie about it to yourself. You say that it's not as bad as it is. It's as bad as it is, but you'll downplay it, right? No, it's really not that big of a deal, even though it's causing so much havoc in your life and suffering for not only you, but the people that you love. So think about addiction. The hardest part about being in the middle of addiction is the people that you hurt are the people that you love the most, and that's what hurts the most. So lying. The next one is denying, right? You deny that you have an addiction. You deny that it's a problem. You essentially deny your reality through that process. And through that process of denying it, well, you can't actually do anything with it. Like I said, the moment of healing happens when you accept and admit, but denying is what prolongs the addiction to happen way longer than you would ever want it to happen. The next one is trying. So trying, and what I mean by trying is that you try to overcome the addiction. You try to stop. How many times have you tried to stop? How many times have you lied to yourself, right, saying that this is going to be the last time? I can't tell you how many times I lied to myself saying that this is going to be the last time, but I did it over and over and over again. And the wall that ultimately keeps this thing alive. And again, all of these keep it alive, but this is the big one. It's hiding. Hiding is a symptom of shame. The only reason why you hide anything from somebody else is that you feel shameful of it. Now, I say the only reason, there are absolutely some exceptions, but ultimately, if you're not willing to be transparent about it with somebody else, you feel some sort of way about it. That way is embarrassed, and embarrassment is shame. So the 4 walls are hiding, lying, denying, and trying. And these are the 4 walls that keep the addiction alive. So thinking about this in this way and why the sex therapist would go there first made a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense for me now. Now, with the sex therapist, also recommended that I go to like some PAA or SAA meetings, in which I did. But in the first, I only went for the 2 meetings, and I only saw the sex therapist for a couple of meetings as well. The SAA and the PAA, this is what I did not like intuitively, is that I had to self-identify. I had to say, hi, my name's Zach. I'm a porn addict. That is not true. Now, I know that's hard to hear right now for anybody that's listening that's actually struggling with porn addiction. That is not true. The next thing I would have to say is, and I am powerless against my addiction. That also is not true. Now, we're going to talk about this later. I just want to plant the seed so you understand that, 1, you are not an addict, but you might be addicted, 2 different things, and that you are so powerful that you created your addiction through choice, not that you're powerless against it. These 2 premises are false, and they prolong how long it would take for you to heal. I intuitively, like this is what I know now, but I intuitively just felt like it was wrong. So what I ended up doing is the sex therapist said that I need to go clean for 90 days. Clean meaning no sex, no jacking off, no porn, no nothing. And I did it. Now, this is, when I tell other guys this, they're like, you act like it was so easy. It wasn't easy. It fucking sucked. Like, I'm going to be real with you guys. Like, it was terrible. But I didn't want to lose my ex-wife. Like I had a lot of motivation, right, to not want to lose her. And that was a huge propelling for me. But the other thing that motivated me was the fact that I knew that whatever this addiction wasn't actually who I was. And I was so motivated to know who I really was. I was so motivated to experience life and love in the way that I wanted to experience it. So there was those two motivators that had to happen. Now, let me tell you about my time through these 90 days, and really ended up being 120 days. During the first 30 days, I was absolutely fighting cravings. Now, my ex-wife knew I had to go on 90 days, so she was supporting me. She was supporting me by asking me questions and making sure that I wasn't alone and all these different things. She did a great job of supporting me. But the first 30 days, I was fighting cravings, really, really hard cravings. The next 30 to 45 days, so was that day 30 to 75, I was like asexual. Like I had no sex drive. I stopped waking up with like morning erections. I rarely had dreams. Nothing was attractive to me sexually whatsoever. That was actually the scariest part. And when I talk to other guys that have gone through this, and when I'm even guiding guys through this, like that's a very scary part for them. And then at about 45 to, or days 75 to, let's say 100, like my sex drive started to come back, and my ex-wife looked beautiful. Like she was always beautiful, but like I started to recognize her in my own like sexual attraction to her. And then at 120 days, 4 months after stopping altogether, I was able to have sex with my ex-wife without the use of any sort of enhancer, Viagra, Cialis, anything like that. And that was the first time I had sex with her just naturally. I don't know. I think my honeymoon, like years, like two years or something like that. And again, that was so sporadic through the process. So it was terrible, right? But I did it. Now, what happened was I got really freaking proud, so much pride that I had stopped watching pornography that I had really did not focus on the other behaviors that are attached to addiction. And that would be lying, controlling, and manipulating. I was still lying to my ex-wife. I was still controlling her to see what I wanted her to see and manipulating her to see what I wanted her to see. And I was very focused on trying to make her happy without focusing on my own behaviors. That were the things that were not making her happy. That we were definitely in a what would you call it? A codependent dynamic, right? The only reason why I loved myself is because she gave me love. Essentially, if you look at codependency, that's what it is. It's you depend on somebody else for you to experience love. As long as you're in a codependent relationship with anybody, you're not going to experience the self-love that you're looking for because you're dependent on it from an outside source. Ultimately, addiction really is that. Addiction is the never-ending search outside of yourself for fulfillment. And as you search, you might find things that elicit addictive responses for your body, dopamine, serotonin, as in drugs and porn and alcohol and these things. But essentially, you're searching for something that you're never going to find outside of yourself. So that is my broader definition for addiction, the never-ending search outside of yourself for fulfillment. Now, because I wasn't monitoring these behaviors and not really changing, I had stopped watching porn, but I was not actively doing anything to become a better man. I was not aware of the lying, the dishonesty, the manipulation. I was not aware of those things. I kept doing those things. She then was also unhappy again. And I remember, and this is one of the hardest stories of my life to share, is that she came home and she just wasn't having it anymore. She didn't want to talk to me. Now, at the time, I would be classified as anxious attachment, and she would be anxious avoidant in our communication styles. What that means is anxious attachment means that I need to talk about the problem right now. I need to solve the problem right now. And if I don't, my anxiety is through the roof. Hers is anxious avoidant, which means that don't talk to me, give me space. I don't want to talk about this. So you can see how these two type of communication styles will clash and they do not work well together. Well, I kept pushing, wanted to talk about what was wrong, and she didn't want to talk all the way to the point where she had locked herself in our closet. Now, I never physically hurt my ex-wife, and I would never do that to any woman. Did I emotionally create emotional trauma for my ex-wife? Absolutely. Did I emotionally damage my ex-wife through our relationship? Absolutely. So she was behind the door, right? And I'm sitting up against the door and I'm just asking her, I'm like, please don't leave me. Please don't leave me. You know, she's talking about she doesn't want to be in the relationship anymore. She wants to leave. And I'm like, please don't leave. And as I'm sitting up against the door, Eventually after pushing her so much, she swings open the door and she yells, "I want to die." And then she starts to run towards the kitchen. Now, I assume that she's running towards the kitchen to grab a knife, so I get into the door frame and I block her and I'm crying. And I'm like, please don't go. Please don't do this. Please, I'll go. I would never want this to happen. And it was at that moment that one of the deepest traumas that came from my addiction came forward, in which I realized that my addiction, my actions, my behavior had led to the person that I love the most no longer want to be on this planet. Not that they didn't want to be with me anymore, that they didn't want to live anymore. And when that happened, something else happened. It was like all the different choices that I had made in my life had led up to that moment flashed before my eyes. And it was like, again, I was like watching a movie of my life. And as I was watching a movie of my life of all these different choices and seeing all the suffering and all the whole story that I told in the last episode, I just had another question pop up. Who's watching? Who's watching? How am I watching this story right now? What is happening right now? So I had two questions that started to really drive me in my own understanding of myself, which is who's listening and who's watching, if not me. So these things are just things to think about right now, because I'm going to start bringing you down a pathway of the healing aspect. I'm just telling you that those two are the ones, those two questions drove so much motivation inside of me to want for me to understand what happened to me through the process. So a couple of months later, again, we had become more disconnected, and, I knew that she didn't want to be with me anymore. And she left for a week, and she said she wanted space. I couldn't give her space. I kept texting her and, telling her, please don't leave me and all this kind of stuff. And then when she came back from the trip, she said, I want a divorce. And I was on my knees groveling. I can look back and say it was one of the most pathetic moments of my life, in which I was on my knees. I was crying, groveling, please don't leave me. Please don't divorce me. Please don't go. And ultimately, that was it for her. She had decided that she had had enough, that she supported me as long as I could. She couldn't get over the dishonesty. She couldn't get over the lying. And I don't blame her. I did at the time, right? At the time I was heartbroken, but like now, I can see it so clearly and just say, well, of course this would be the case. What human being in their right mind would want to be with me at that point? So the very last thing that really stung was that we ended up signing our divorce papers on Valentine's Day. So Valentine's Day became it's not anymore. I'm revisiting it in this way, you know what I mean? But like for a long time, I did not like Valentine's Day, because Valentine's Day was the reminder that I got divorced that day. It's not that I don't feel that way or get reminded of it on Valentine's Day, but there was an emotional energy behind it that luckily now I do not have, because I've been able to experience some really beautiful Valentine's Day with my fiance. But that was what happened to that point. So, that's where I'm going to end it here on this part of the story. I'll tell you again, those two questions, who's listening and who's watching, are going to be what drives this next episode. So I like to call this next episode Escaping Hell. And what actually happened, in a sense of all the different modalities that I looked up, the science, different things that I explored, really, again, wanting to know three things. One, to answer those two questions. Two, I wanted to know what happened to me. Like, how did I not feel like myself, but I was inside of this addiction? Like, physiologically, what happened to me? And then this new thing started to pop up inside of me, which is this question of, is there a God? If you remember, I got to the point where I was atheist. So I was like, is there a God? And maybe that's true. So that's what brings us to the end of this episode. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, if you're on YouTube and you watch this entire episode, drop a comment, anything that I said that maybe you identify with, any comments, any reflections that you have. I'm open to anything, any questions for sure. I will answer them in the timely manner, the best that I can. Like, subscribe, do all those things. I'll say that, this is difficult for me to share these things, and not difficult for me to share these things, because really it's just my experience. I really, truly give you these things from the bottom of my heart because I love you. I don't know who you are. In a sense, I haven't met you on this physical plane just yet, but I know who you are. You are me. I love you. And remember that you are all you need to be to set yourself free. If something deep inside of you resonated with today's topic, drop a question or comment below. It would be my honor to chat with you. Remember to share this video with just one person you desire to set free, because all it takes is one video, one message, one experience to awaken our collective birthright of freedom and the self-realization that we are all one.